Question was, don't you think Trump's rhetoric as the president of the United States is way more dangerous than any, left-wingers on college campuses who may be, they may be assholes, but are they dangerous?
So the distinction that I'd see is, I think President Trump and a lot of people tend to make jokes about things. Charlie Kirk dies, everyone's making jokes about Charlie Kirk's death.
When you say everyone, you
people
say
on
people on campus, right?
Destiny,
Okay, but what you don't say, sorry, I don't want to, what you don't say is nobody in government is making jokes about it. Not a
few candidates did, but
yeah, I'll give you $100 right now if you tell me a candidate who celebrated Charlie Kirk's death.
The AG,
like an actual,
I'm forgetting
he
the
was
state.
a former AG, right?
Former AG, yeah.
So he wasn't actually in office.
Okay.
But someone who is actually in office at the federal, state, or local level, I'll give you $100.
This is a different point that I'm making. Okay. Is that I actually don't have a problem with jokes. If you want to make a joke about Charlie Kirk dying, I won't laugh. I won't find it funny. But a joke's a joke, And a lot of Republicans, when Charlie Kirk said himself, when Nancy Pelosi's husband had his head beat in tragically, he's jokingly said like, "Oh, who's this guy? I'll pay for his bond or whatever." And like jokes are jokes, and
Trump Jr. I remember posted a meme about the hammer.
I don't take jokes seriously. What really is upsetting to me is as a student on this campus, no more jokes. People are adamantly supporting the political violence in a way that I'm really big in right-wing circles. I have college Republican chapters across the state. And what I can confidently say is when Trump comes out and says the thing that he said about Mueller, everyone was like, this is a real low point for the admin. This is awful. This is terrible. And I didn't see anyone defending Trump personally on that side.
But I guess I just want to make the distinction.
So that bothers me a lot more.
I'm sure if we did a random sample, way less than the majority of people would actually celebrate violence against Charlie Kirk. I'm not saying
left-wingers, I would be surprised if that were the case.
If you're talking about far left-wingers, but in terms of actual Democrats and liberals.
Polling on college campuses of people who identify themselves as hard left, and I think the majority of them support using violence as a means to.
But what percentage of actual liberals and Democrats would you say are the far left?
There's not been any polling done on this.
Okay, but here's what I do know.
College campuses at the very least are completely rotten and terrible.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say in total, but I'm sure there's plenty of rot. I went to a college campus. I know, I get it. But here's the difference. Are any of those people actually in the government? Are they winning elections? Or are all of the Democrats condemning Charlie Kirk's murder? There's 100,000 Democrats at federal, state, and local levels throughout the entire country. We found evidence of one single Democrat in the entire United States who mocked it. He was a city councilman in Cornelius, Oregon. That is literally it. So I just want to make the distinction because I do hear what you're saying. College campuses can be a nightmare. There's a distinction between actual elected officials and just people who might happen to vote Democrat.
All I can say is the reason that a president or any elected official's rhetoric would be particularly worse if it's impacting the way that they do their job, or if it's telling of the way they do their job, or if it's influencing people to adopt that same ideology. From what I've seen, Trump's rhetoric is not influencing anyone to adopt that ideology. I've seen pretty universal condemnation of it, and like, do I like it? No, I don't like how Trump talks about people who die. I think
so you're saying Trump's rhetoric hasn't induced anyone to act in any way, but Democrats' rhetoric has?
It probably has, and I'll be fair here. I think that the difference is Trump says the things out loud, and I think the Democrats say things that lead to logical conclusions and let their supporters come to the understanding, calling Trump Hitler, comparing him to Hitler.
Well, name one politician.
Kamala Harris.
He called him Hitler?
She compared him to Hitler, yes.
But she didn't call him Hitler.
So she said Trump is directing his military like he's Hitler. It was something.
Okay, well, I know I can tell you one politician who did directly call him Hitler, and I think you know the answer to that.
J.D. Vance?
Yeah,
which he also shouldn't have done, which is also
that's how we felt.
I hate the term Trump to
That's the only politician I know of that actually called him Hitler.
So Kamala Harris regularly made comparisons to him and Hitler, called ICE the Gazpacho. Like a lot of
the Gestapo.
Gestapos.
Some soup sounds good right now. No, I know you've been talking a lot, but okay, but hasn't Trump called Kamala Biden fascist over and over and over again during the campaign trail? We can supercut it.
But she's a fascist. Okay, she's a fascist. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist. There's a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
I think they're fascists.
Fascism.
Pure fascism.
They've also called him fascist before.
Well, sure. So if anything, it's a both sides issue.
The thing that I always fall back on is that Democrats do. I don't know if it's something psychological about people who happen to vote Democrat, people who happen to vote Republican, but it's Democrats who are adopting these actual viewpoints.
Which
viewpoints?
Unfuck
America. Charlie, Destiny saying Charlie Kirk should be afraid to God.
But twice in that same interview, he said, of course he condemns political violence. I mean, this is literally what Destiny does for a living. Of course he does not want violence.
You can't say, of course they should be afraid to share their opinions. That is. At the very least, you're saying that people should be physically afraid for their own well-being, which in itself, even if he doesn't think people should go out and kill people, saying that I should be afraid of going out and sharing an opinion that 50% of the United States holds, that I should be afraid for my life to do that, is already fascist.
He's not saying you should be afraid for your life to speak your mind.
No, you should be safe. So what did he mean when he said Charlie Kirk should be afraid?
You'd have to ask Destiny. I'm sure he's litigated this. He's not here.
You need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events so that they look to their leadership to turn down the temperature. I won't condemn anything until the President of the United States States can go on air and say, all of us need to calm down.
So you won't condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk until Donald Trump says something.
I'm a YouTuber. Leftists and Democrats have been condemning and turning down the temperature, condemning violence, turning down the temperature for a decade. Donald Trump can't go on TV and say, all of us need to calm down.
Okay, yeah, no, so obviously what he meant is people should be afraid to go out and share their political opinions.
Okay,
right?
Again, but what you keep saying is, I
know
don't think so. I genuinely, I've never met him, but I genuinely don't know what he said.
What
I will
else
look
could
after
that
this.
possibly mean?
Okay, here's the thing. What you keep doing is you keep talking about random citizens versus actually people like Donald Trump and the government.
And I'll say why. Donald Trump's rhetoric, to me, doesn't seem to be influencing swaths of violence where left-wingers.
Donald Trump's rhetoric has caused multiple deaths in the streets of America. He defended a literal killing of a citizen in Minneapolis.
Who?
Alex Preddy.
Alex Preddy.
Was he murdered? Yes or no?
Killed.
Was he murdered?
I do not believe it was a murder.
And why don't you believe it was a murder?
I think that the officer. First of all, I think the situation was not handled well, which an example of bad law enforcement is not an example of murder. I think that he had a reasonable expectation of bodily injury and imminent harm. The officer, I'm sure you saw, the officer who took his gun misfired it into the floor. It's unclear if the weapon misfired.
So it's a negligent
itself.
homicide at the very least.
Not
right?
a negligent homicide. No,
Okay.
it would be.
It's a homicide at the very least.
It would not be a homicide. No.
So why is that not a homicide? If you don't do anything wrong and you get murdered, that's not a homicide?
No, it's not a homicide. So
what is that?
I'll give you an example. Imagine I have a concealed carry and I'm walking on the sidewalk, right? And I think I hear someone in the bushes. And I pull out my gun, and I think someone's jumping out at me. I shoot them. And then there's somebody right in front of me, and they see me pointing a gun in their general direction, and they start stabbing me.
Yeah.
That person, the first person, did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
It was still not a homicide. There was reasonable expectation of imminent bodily harm with the information provided, just as there was in the case of Alex Preddy.
Okay, first off, so are you an officer of the law who's supposed to be trained to de-escalate and not shoot someone? And also,
still not. That would make it.
What if the person who came out of the bushes and has now been wrestled to the ground by 7 different agents and poses no threat to you? Yeah. Then you shoot him.
No, so there's still imminent harm because the officer heard that Alex Preddy had a gun.
So that's it? That's the only justification you need?
No.
So
Certainly not. The Second Amendment protects that behavior.
Okay, so did Kyle Rittenhouse deserve to get shot?
Well, no, he did not deserve. Just Alex Preddy did not deserve to get shot.
Would it have been murdered if a cop literally just saw Kyle Rittenhouse and shot him?
No.
Why?
Because if a cop saw what Rittenhouse was, and he shouldn't have, I'm going to clarify. The cop should not have killed Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse was also innocent. But if a cop saw what was, no, I'm talking about Rittenhouse. And Preddy, both of them in their cases.
Okay, but
so Rittenhouse, if a police officer saw what was happening and he genuinely believed that Rittenhouse was shooting innocent bystanders, the police officer would have been in the at least not.
But Alex Preddy wasn't shooting or harming any innocent bystanders. So what was the justification?
Kyle Rittenhouse was also not shooting any innocent bystanders.
Right. That's why I don't think Kyle Rittenhouse deserved to die. Just like Alex Preddy should not have been killed.
No, but you're missing the point, which is that if a police officer saw what Rittenhouse was doing and genuinely perceived an imminent threat to his own life, he would have had the legal authority to shoot him.
So what was the threat that he perceed Alex Preddy was doing?
He believed he had a gun. The officer said gun, 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 and he heard a gunshot fire, and he could have figured that Alex Preddy was pointing the gun at him. Now,
but that doesn't. So if you have a gun right now and I scream gun, 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 that you're saying he has the right to shoot you right now. My cameraman can just shoot you.
No, he doesn't have the right, but there is.
Well, he has the legal justification. You're saying to do it.
There is circumstances where they could have. Look, do you think the officer had any? Why do you think the officer shot Alex Preddy? Genuine question.
Because they're untrained.
Because they're untrained, but you don't think he did it because he wanted to kill him?
I don't know if there was actual malice. I doubt there was actual malice.
So this would be.
So
that would automatically disqualify from homicide. I'd like to say.
Okay.
Because homicide homicide.
You're saying if there was an actual malice, that doesn't fall under the legal definition of homicide.
So it would not have fallen under the legal definition of homicide if the officer did it because he had a reasonable and imminent expectation of harm. There's other charges that you could tack, but not homicide. Homicide would not be one of them.
So what should be the charge? What should happen to the officers who erroneously murdered a citizen?
So it wasn't murder technically.
Okay. They killed a citizen.
So I think that there
what should happen
of course should be a complete investigation.
Why isn't there an investigation?
I'm not an expert in the negligence charges that could have been brought that could be brought against. If there was any, those would be the charges that they could.
At the very least, can you condemn the statements that the administration, Trump, Kristi Noem, and all them put out calling him a domestic terrorist, trying to massacre law enforcement and doing maximum damage?
Kristi Noem is probably my least favorite person.
Okay, can we condemn Trump who put a post out calling him a terrorist?
Yes. No, he called Renee Good a terrorist.
I'm pretty sure they called both.
I think it was just Renee Good.
The DHS made a post that called him a
Trump's statement on Renee Good especially. I don't even think he watched the clip before putting out the statement, based on what his statement said.
But do you see where my difference is? This is coming from the literal top down, the president of the United States and the administration. You never see a Democrat, you would never in a million years see any Democrat politician name one. And what
Kyle
circumstance?
Rittenhouse calling him a murderer. Pretty much every Democrat.
Hold up. if Kyle Rittenhouse was genuinely gunned down in the street, they would not have said, "Good, fuck this fucking terrorist." They don't.
No,
Politicians
a lot of them, they wanted to
say
put
that.
him in jail for the rest of his life. The majority opinion
because they saw, just like you're seeing this legal difference in Alex Preddy, they saw a legal difference in the Kyle Rittenhouse. So that's
okay.
that's
Sure. There
it's
you
not
go.
because
That's the difference.
okay.
So you're acting like, oh, well, there's this huge, and the Democrats would never do. They did. There's just a disagreement on the facts of the case because people aren't aware of them.
No, they don't. Democrats don't defend murder. They try to condemn what they saw as murder,
Yeah, so
even if you disagree with.
They try to put Kyle Rittenhouse in jail for the rest of his life for self-defense.
When you say they, you mean prosecutors and a trial found him innocent. So
no, not just prosecutors.
Okay.
The entire, most House reps, senators, I think even the president at the time, all the people in politics at the time. I'm not remembering.
Because they condemn violence, even if you agree it was justified
they were
violence,
saying that
they're
he should have went
condemning
to jail
violence
for the rest of his life. This was a big movement.
Because they saw it as murder, just like you see Alex Preddy's situation as not reaching the barrier of murder.
So the thing is, you're saying look at how evil the Republicans are, how evil good the Democrats are.
No, I'm looking at how evil.
These are synonymous situations that are occurring.
No.
Why are they not synonymous?
Because what's synonymous is they're condemning the murdered versus the murderer. I know you don't see it as the murderer in the same way. That's fine. We can have a legal justification going tit for tat back and forth. But they're not condemning. If Republicans literally condemned the slain victims and said, look at these fucking terrorists, even though they weren't terrorists, that's a big difference than going after the person who brought an AR-15 as an 18 or a 17-year-old, I think, to kill 3 people or kill 2 and injure 1. There's a difference between condemning the person who does it and the people who are actually killed, even if you don't think it was a legal justification.
These are both situations where somebody was attempted to be prosecuted for a crime that they did not commit, or put on the trial of public opinion for a crime that they did not commit.
Okay, but do you see why Democrats, like in Charlie Kirk, they condemn the person who uses the gun and actually kills someone, just like in the Alex Preddy situation?
Definitely.
Republicans and Donald Trump cannot bring themselves to do it if they don't agree with the politics of the person on the other side.
I think
if it's Alex Preddy, they say he's a terrorist. Renee Goody's a terrorist.
If any of them were
Anyone's a terrorist.
assassinated, I think that there would be universal condemnation.
Melissa Hortman, there was 0 condemnation.
She was the.
It was about 4 months before Charlie Kirk was
was
murdered.
Was it Minnesota? What were we talking about here?
Where was Melissa Hortman? Do you remember Melissa Hortman? Do you remember Melissa Hortman?
Minnesota one?
Was she Minnesota? Okay.
Yeah, no. Republicans came out pretty universally and were against
They did
that.
not.
And also the
Donald
guy who
Trump
did
did
it
not.
worked for.
And again, like you just said, Paul Pelosi, they make fun of violence. Donald Trump.
Well, they make jokes about it, but so do liberals, right?
Okay. But liberals in office, the elected politicians, do not.
No, Trump should be much more professional than he is.
But that's what I'm saying. But you're comparing campus protesters, campus culture, which I agree has gotten out of hand, to the literal president of the United States.
I'm comparing campus violence to statements made by the president. And I think the violence on campuses is worse than statements made by the president.
And which campus violence would not be condemned by a Democrat politician?
Well, it happens in subtle ways. It's not just
You're saying harassment?
No, they say there's words and then there's actions. Mm-hmm. We had 5 instances of battery where everyone was cited. I believe one of them is being prosecuted. All of them are on camera committing battery. I have video, we have footage evidence.
And is this a local police department issue,
No,
or you're
no,
saying this is the top of the
so
Democrats now?
This is a state level thing with our not wanting to prosecute people for crimes, not wanting to prosecute people for political crimes. And
you know who doesn't want to prosecute people for crimes is the Trump administration for some literally slain victim in the street.
I don't really want to move subjects yet.
Okay, but you know who was prosecuted is the person who shot Charlie Kirk was immediately arrested and of course is being prosecuted and should rot in jail for the rest of his life or be given the death penalty. But Trump and the Republicans don't see. Okay, fair enough. So you're pro-life, I assume. That's fine. Then he should rot in jail. But the difference is every single Democrat comes out and condemns that and says, of course this person should be arrested. But when it happens on a different side, when the literal federal government kills someone, even if you don't believe it was technically homicide, the Trump administration is blocking investigations into it, calling the victim a terrorist, protecting the murderer or the killer, and doing everything they can to prevent an investigation. That is my core difference, and that's why it's an issue. So you're saying if there's an assault or harassment on campus, absolutely it should be prosecuted.
No,
you wouldn't find Kamala Harris saying, no, we shouldn't prosecute that.
I understand. And what I'm saying is that the actual tangible ways in which violence is permitted and allowed that actually affect individuals' lives is not statements by the president. And I'm confident of this because I've lived it and seen it out every day. My chapters have lived it and seen it out. If you are a college Republican in California, it is impossible to do a week of tabling without one instance of battery. Impossible. It is unheard of to do a week of tabling without a case of battery.
And you don't think Kamala Harris or Biden condemn violence?
No, you're not understanding. So what I'm saying is I actually
you're just saying it happens to be worse on campuses in this specific location.
No, not just on campuses. What I'm saying is that there is an actualized violence amongst the left that does not exist on the right.
But the stats don't show that though.
They do, and it's difficult to prove. So the Cato study that I'm sure you're referencing counts all religious violence as right-wing violence, which is ridiculous. All anti-Semitic violence is right-wing violence, which is also ridiculous. And the methodology of the study is awful. Also, right-wing violence goes far less reported than left-wing violence. I would believe
What's your proof that the right-wing violence goes far less reported?
It's anecdotal, but there's no studies on it, so it'd be difficult to prove.
Even if I grant you that premise that this anecdotal evidence somehow
that was one piece of the
argument.
Okay,
but at best to then argue the fact that no, it's actually left-wing violence is worse, and at least just call it a wash and not call it a wash. Can we at least, if I grant your premise, can you say, okay, there's violence on both sides, and you can't just go the other way and say now the left-wing violence is worse.
There's never been I'm not saying there's never been an example of right-wing violence.
No, I know, but you're not even saying
the
stats show that right-wing violence is particularly higher, and you're saying not only is that. Well, it does show that. We can put the stats right here.
No, those are not properly collected stats. I'm familiar with the studies.
So you're negating the study, and not only saying the studies are false.
Weird. I actually like Hato,
which is fine.
I think they really missed.
You can negate. So you're not only not just negating the study, you're saying also the study is actually literally the opposite. It's way more on the left-wing side, just because I see it around campus in my eyes. Even though
no. I'm making a very particular point. Enough anecdotes add up to a statistic, and if I collect, and
not in a scientific way, but
certainly, if I were to, I could publish a study. You know what? Maybe I will. I'll survey every college Republican chapter, ask if they've been assaulted, and I'll reach out to NF America, and you guys can push the stats out.
Okay, but that's a college chapter. I don't know what you're.
No, I'm just saying that actualized violence from the left, to me, and what I see, not just on the news, but actually lived out in person through polling as to whether there is polling as to whether students on the left or right support violence. Far-right Republicans
Again, you're
are
only talking about super left-wing students.
No,
you're not talking about
I'll say far-right Republicans are less likely to be in support of using violence as a means to quelling political discussion than moderate left students are.
Okay.
This is
You're talking about a poll number, but the stats don't show that they actually do. Just because they answer a poll number.
They do.
Okay, I don't know what stats you're referencing, but you can send them to me after this.
Yeah, definitely. But
you're talking anecdotally, which
I'm not. I've cited a few, and I'm talking about actual support for political violence that is actualized and exists out in university environments. And I think.
Okay, but again.
Not even just in universities, just on the.
But you're saying, okay, so you're saying support for political violence, even though we know that literally Donald Trump and the administration has repeatedly supported political violence. This is coming from the top down.
It's a testament to the right wing's hatred of political violence. Is that even though the president is going out and
the president's
making disgusting statements.
So the president saying I can't condemn political violence is a testament to how much they hate political violence?
No. What I'm saying is that the right's universal condemnation of political violence.
It's not universal. The president won't do it. He can't do it. That's what you were referencing with Destiny earlier.
Political violence.
Okay, but when you talked about Destiny,
the president's not in support of political violence.
He cannot condemn it. No, he says the left are domestic terrorists. Stephen Miller said they should be taken care of.
Trump made inappropriate statements about people who have passed away that disagreed with him, but he's never been in favor of political violence. That is an important.
He can't condemn it. So is that? I think you can finish your point. I think we've litigated enough, but I want to get to January 6th. And you said the Republicans don't condone political violence. He pardoned over 170 people convicted of assaulting police officers with a deadly weapon at the Capitol building. Is that political violence?
Generally, looking at the outside looking in, seems like it should not have been a blanket pardon. I've also not looked into those cases.
It shouldn't have been any pardon. Who should have been pardoned?
People who are still in prison for trespassing on January 6th.
Okay, but he pardoned all 1,500 of them and then claimed that it was an FBI, false flag or whatever.
Yeah, no. So
is that not the biggest example of political violence we've ever seen in our recent lives? Would you say there's a bigger?
No, absolutely not.
What's a bigger?
Black Lives Matter riots in 2020, and it's not. It's like 1%.
Okay, and did Joe Biden pardon Black Lives Matter rioters? Of course not.
Kamala Harris raised funds to get people to pay bonds and cover people's legal defense fees to get them out.
Okay, would you say for trespassing? You think it was violent criminals or for trespassers? You want to make an apples-to-apples comparison? Do you think she was raising that for people who were actually beating the shit out of police officers or for trespassers?
I think it's for people who are rioting and looting.
Okay, so not violent criminals. Trump actually pardoned violent criminals who tried to help him overthrow an election on the day of the certification of the election. If that is not the biggest example of political violence and the endorsement of it from the President of the United States and everyone who supported that and reelected him, and he was reelected after that.
The commonplace rejection of political violence on the right is a lot more important to me than the rhetoric that the left has been pursuing.
It's not commonplace rejection. He pardoned all of them, and they all don't care. Nobody cares. You don't care.
They do care. People do care.
They voted for him, and they supported it.
There's a multi-factored equation here, right? Like, I'm not going to vote for an unrealized gains tax because, some people might be pardoned. Like, this is different scales of things that are bad. Letting Iran develop a nuclear weapon.
So pardoning people who beat the shit out of police officers is comparable to an unrealized gains tax?
I'm going to be honest, I can't speak on those cases because I haven't looked into them.
Okay, you said that about Melissa Hortman. You said, I'm not really sure about the January 6th. You're like, I'm not really sure. But campus protesters, I know every violence that has ever occurred.
About every single person that you've mentioned. There's been a few people that you've mentioned that I think I've actually done a really good job at refuting you on. Alex Preddy, Renee Good, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Okay, you think he wasn't technically homicided, but still there's no investigation. There's no investigation. They've called him a domestic terrorist trying to massacre law enforcement, which we know was a lie. A wrongful death killing of an officer?
What evidence could possibly be included?
That Alex Preddy did not pose a threat to them?
The DOJ announced an investigation the day that it happened.
Okay, but and if there was an investigation, I suppose you're right. Trump would pardon them, so it doesn't matter.
I don't think Trump would pardon them.
I think we got to go in a second.
I think if they were wrongfully found guilty, Trump would pardon them. That's the point of a pardon. Yes.
So the people on January 6th were wrongfully found guilty for beating the shit out of police officers?
Can you
also
name a
on
case,
camera?
Name a case. Give me some details.
There's 170 people who pled guilty. You want me to name their actual names?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I don't know their names. You want me to look it up right now?
It sounds like you don't know enough about these cases to say that they were.
You want me to remember all 1,500 people's names
no,
that he pardoned?
No, I mean like one of them. But this is my point. Is like
all the Proud Boys.
I don't want you and I to talk back and forth about shit that neither of us know anything about.
Peter Schwartz, 14 years. Patrick McKay III, and Thomas Webster convicted for using pepper spray shields and flagpoles against police officers. That's bad, right? What do you say?
How did I start this conversation?
Tell me.
From the outside looking in, it seems like it really should have been a blanket pardon.
But see how the way you talk about it, you're a little wishy-washy. It seems like people who beat the shit out of police officers shouldn't have been pardoned.
No,
that's an issue. But the unrealized gains tax, that's
not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's 150 people. You said 150 people.
About 170.
I haven't looked into a single one of their cases. Okay. So for me to say I condemn the president in his pardoning of them really doesn't mean anything. Okay. Just as you haven't looked into any of the cases.
I have looked. Just because I don't remember the names doesn't mean I haven't looked. Okay, Daniel Joseph, DJ Rodriguez. He was the one. Officer Brian Fanone or Michael Fanone, who's testified in Congress. He was sentenced for 12 and a half years for using a stun gun on him.
And we can look into them right now. You're not proving me wrong. You're just educating me. I've said this from the beginning. From the outside looking in,
so you seem to be so educated on random left-wing campus harassment that isn't prosecuted,
but not on every day. Yeah.
Okay, but not on the president of the United States who pardoned people who beat the shit out of police officers. No Democrat would ever do that in a million years, right?
I want to say, first of all, I'm pretty well informed on the polling data and the information on political violence.
But not about political violence happens.
You tried citing a Cato study to me, and I told you why the study didn't work, and I'm willing to bet you didn't know the methodologies of the study.
So you know all about the methodologies of a Cato study, but you just haven't looked into the violence that happened on January 6th. It escaped your news cycle?
Because I don't think that the pardons were good.
Okay, so you avoid things that you don't think are good.
No, I'm agreeing with you that the pardons were likely not a good thing.
But you said the right does not condone political violence.
But you also haven't looked into any of these cases.
I'm
You're doing
reciting them.
Great, you're doing it now. That's so great that we're educating ourselves together. But
okay, you said the right does not condone political violence.
Yeah, I don't see. Well,
you said Trump condemns political violence. Not only does he not condemn it, he encourages it.
Why is it a
gotcha? He led the insurrection.
Why is it a gotcha for you to stand here? Ask me, what do you think about the pardons? And I say, oh well, they seem like they're probably a bad thing.
Because you contradicted yourself by saying
I never
Trump
contradicted myself.
Because you said the right does not condone political violence. Not only do they condone it, Trump led it, pardoned them, and pardoned everyone involved.
I think Trump has a unique ability of lying to himself. And I think that
and not condemning political violence, and condoning political violence, and fostering violence, and pardoning people who beat the shit out of police officers.
I think
he has a unique ability for that.
I think he has a story in his mind about just for juxtaposition, the 2020 election. I do genuinely believe that he thinks he won that election. The same way that I think that he genuinely believes that those people did not.
But you know he didn't, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you put that as an important issue, trying to overthrow a democratically elected government? As one of the most important issues. What do you put as a more important issue than that? Left-wingers on campus who harass people? Foreign policy beats democracy.
No. So Trump is never going to overthrow democracy. That's not going to happen.
Okay, but he tried.
Yeah, it's not going to work. And also, he was wrong. He was not.
So if I tried to murder one of your family members, but I didn't succeed, would you say, well, that's forgivable?
All right, Biden tried redefining what the executive branch was meant to do and consolidating all power.
But he didn't try to overthrow the government.
No, but he tried to overthrow the powers of Congress and consolidate all power at the executive level. Do you want to play this game? We can play this game.
No, because he didn't try to overthrow an election, and Kamala Harris conceded the next day. Hillary Clinton conceded the next day. They all concede the next day.
Joe Biden crammed an OSHA vaccine mandate. He had a CDC eviction moratorium.
So you put it as a tit for tat. Yeah, people try and overthrow the government because Joe Biden did X as a pretext to lead an insurrection, overthrow the government,
a very specific
pardon all the people who
The reason that these arguments do not hold the water to say, oh, well, Trump attempted to overthrow democracy because he thought he won an election. He didn't. Is to say, okay, it's never going to work. Like, our guardrails are strong enough to hold. It's not going to happen. Also, it's his second term. He's not going to go for a third one.
I don't think he is going to go for a third one.
Yeah, not at all. But
the fact that he tried to overthrow the election was bad enough.
I think that Kamala's foreign policy, and you can say I'm wrong, I think Kamala's foreign policy would have led to many, many, many more innocent deaths than the foreign policy of Donald Trump. So I'm just supposed to stand on principle.
She would have started like a double Iran war, or what? What would have led to more deaths?
We're arguing. This is all the side. So if I genuinely believe that, and you can think I'm wrong, but if I genuinely believe that, I'm just supposed to stand on principle and go, well, Donald Trump needs to be punished for what he did, and not vote for him.
I think you should condemn Donald Trump as an anti-democratic.
I do condemn him.
Okay, as an anti-democratic.
Well, he's not anti-democratic. He's wrong.
So he's not. Again,
he thinks he won the election.
So you think it's just like, oh, he just got his facts. His facts not straight.
Don't get me wrong. This is.
What about all the people that went along with it? Do you think they believed it too? Do you think Rudy Giuliani, all of his co-conspirators also thought that he won?
I think the people really close to him also believed it. I think
really, even though his family, Ivanka and Jared said, yeah, he didn't win. what was
Yeah,
AG Bill
all those things
Barr?
have
Bill,
nothing-
what was
all of those things have
his
nothing
own
to do with
Department
this.
of Justice?
Did you
His
say
own
Bill Maher?
No, Bill Barr,
Bill Barr,
whatever
okay,
his name
what
is.
the fuck?
His own cybersecurity expert
so-
who was tasked to lead the election.
Yes, I agree.
Said it wasn't rigged. Everyone said it wasn't
Yes.
rigged. His own Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, Mike Pence. Everyone said it wasn't rigged. Are they to blame, or did they also just
No, they did the right thing.
They thought
Mike
it was
Pence especially did the right thing.
Okay, but everyone else has went along with it, and they
Yeah, everyone that went along with it was
backed him.
complicit in something. And this is one of the worst.
Okay.
This is one of the worst traits about Donald Trump is his ability to convince himself of falsehoods.
Okay, but what about the people that enabled it, who
What
didn't
I'm
believe
saying-
it?
what
It's
I'm
the worst
saying-
trait about the Republican Party
What I'm
today.
saying-
It's
okay,
not just Donald
here's-
Trump; it's the entire administration.
Okay, so what you're okay, I think you're largely contributing to the thing that makes political debate entirely unproductive. Is you're saying, look at this bad thing, look at this bad thing, this disqualifies, bad thing, bad thing. What I'm doing is like, look, I see the bad thing, I understand it,
And
I
you're
think
saying
it's less bad than these other things.
I'm saying, look at the bad things, so bad from the top.
Nothing is disqualifying for voting for a candidate.
I
genuinely
agree
believe
with that. I don't even, because what if the other option also
worse.
tried to overthrow the government? I'm not saying it's necessarily disqualifying, but you're saying, look at the bad thing over here on campus of someone who never in a million years is going to be president of the United States, people who aren't elected officials. I'm saying, look at the bad things of people who are actually in charge of the party, who do represent the party, who are representing the entire Republican Party right now.
How does that impact policy? I'm just not too concerned with it because it doesn't make a difference.
How does what impact policy?
So, okay,
when policymakers
the violent
do bad
culture,
things?
the violent culture of the left wing
That impacts policy.
The violent culture on the left wing impacts everybody in a way that's actually everybody on the opposite.
But trying to overthrow the government doesn't impact everybody?
Did it impact you in any way?
Hold up.
It didn't impact me in any way.
Hold up. Wait, so you said earlier you think Kamala Harris would have had more deaths. So if someone in Iran dies, that doesn't impact you. So what
No,
impacts
but
you?
it's impacting somebody. And I don't think that.
And
I think the net effect, the net
overthrowing
effect,
democracy wouldn't impact someone?
It would
At
if
least
it
trying
worked,
to?
but it would never work.
So it didn't impact anyone because it didn't work? That's your argument?
Yes, it is.
So
this is Destiny's argument on the unrealized gains tax.
So attempted murder doesn't impact you then?
No.
If we have millions of attempts of murders, that means nothing.
No. I mean, there's actually a pretty good argument to be made here. If there's a bunch of attempted murders and no one ever finds out and no one dies, then yeah.
If nobody finds
Probably
out, sure,
pretty
but,
low
but
on the totem
everyone
pole.
saw him try to overthrow the election.
Yeah, no, and that is a
people
bad thing.
died on someone died on January 6th.
It's a thing that needs to be weighed and be
hold up.
taken
Someone
into account.
people literally died because of his rhetoric around the 2020
people
election.
went in and got themselves shot fighting for something that wasn't true. Yeah.
Okay, so people did die, so it does matter. So is that the
it
only
does
thing that
matter.
matters?
No, this is what I'm telling you. Is
Okay.
I think I'm weighing the candidates, and what I'm saying is that
Okay.
when I weigh the candidates, to me, Kamala, in a way that definitely could not come out in a format in a 15, 30, even hour-long debate.
We'll be done
We need 2 or 3 hours to figure that out. But what I'm saying is I just keep going, look, yes, there's this problem on the right, and I see that and I recognize it, but there's this problem on the left. And you go, well, isn't this other thing disqualifying?
Because the problem you keep saying on the left is coming from these random students you might have an issue with. They're not the president of the United States.
It is not the random student. See, you keep falling back. I've cited studies. I've cited polling data
that the students believe certain things that you don't agree with.
Yes, the students believe things and actually actualize violence against other people.
Okay, but
and I've cited the studies. Like, you keep acting like, oh, one of your peers was mean to you. No, like, people are getting assaulted, people are getting battered, and there's lots of evidence.
And people are trying to break into the Capitol and assaulting police officers and getting pardoned for it. The Democrats don't pardon people who assault people. Has Joe Biden pardoned violent criminals? Did Obama pardon violent criminals? Would Kamala Harris have pardoned violent criminals? Is that a thing? If you say there's a left-wing fostering of violence, wouldn't they pardon violent criminals? They don't do it. There's not one. I guarantee you cannot name a person. I can't either. I've looked it up. I've tried. They don't pardon violent criminals. Donald Trump has pardoned hundreds and plenty of fraudsters too. The billions.
What I'm saying is that there is this asymmetry here.
Okay, but you're saying it comes from the bottom up.
Yes, it comes from
the bottom up. And I agree with that. And I agree with that.
From the top, but it doesn't go down.
It doesn't go down?
No.
January 6th, he led an insurrection of 1,500.
He did not lead an insurrection.
He led an insurrection of 1,500 people.
His untrue wrong statements led to people doing things that they were not at all called on to do. Things that they were not at all
let's go to the Capitol,
let's
go to the Capitol,
yeah, he did
and then didn't call them off until after the violence already started, and then pardoned them. He pardoned them.
He said go to the Capitol, march peacefully and patriotically.
Okay, and then he pardoned them after they beat the shit out of police officers. So obviously he fostered and condoned that. Otherwise, why would he have pardoned them?
Because he's mistaken about reality, which is a unique ability that Donald Trump has.
Okay, so then mistakenly he condones political violence and fosters
not mistakenly.
it.
You don't mistakenly.
You're not being logical. Then it doesn't make sense.
No, what I'm saying, you can even say just a little reword to your argument. You can even say he is supporting political violence by doing this. That does not mean he condones the political violence.
So by